Well, your two favorite detectives are back.
Explosions, death, demons, and disappearances. We've got it all, and we're willing to share.
That certainly is a lot. Let's get into it.
Starting off the list today, we have the Tunguska Event. I'm sorry if I am pronouncing that wrong, but it was an unexplained 12 megaton explosion as powerful as 12 million tons of TNT, and it occurred near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River in Russia. The event took place on the morning of June 30th in 1908, and the explosion took out an estimated 3 civilians and over 2,150 square kilometers, 500,000 acres of forest area. It was and still is the largest impact event to take place on Earth in recorded history. Hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic weapons set off over Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Although some people believe that Nikola Tesla, the inventor of the Tesla coil, may have inadvertently caused the explosion while testing out some new technology, others believe that the explosion was caused by a meteor which either collided with the Earth, making the devastation the result of an impact event, or a meteor that exploded at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers, about 16 to 33,000 feet above the ground. I'm not sure about you guys, but I feel like if the explosion was caused by a meteor, there would have been eyewitness reports confirming the presence of a meteor. But I guess that's just me, because it remains a mystery.
Next up, we have a pretty macabre case known as the Lady of the Dunes. So on June 26, 1974, in Provincetown, Massachusetts, the body of a woman was discovered on a beach. The body was found by a family who'd been returning home from the beach, and the woman in question was found laying on a beach towel. Her head was almost completely separated from her body, and her hands had also been completely removed. This made it a lot more difficult to identify her, and guess what? They never did. There were no signs of a struggle, so it seemed like the victim may have known her attacker, but that, along with footprints leading away from the scene, were all they really had to go off of. No one in town seemed to know who this woman was, and the assailant sure wasn't going to say anything, so the case is still a complete mystery to this day.
Next on the list, the Daytlov Pass incident. On February 26 of 1959, 2 male hikers were found dead in Daytlov Pass in the mountains of what is current-day Russia. That's the second Russia mystery on this list. Are they hiding something? I don't know. Anyways, the 2 men had been missing for days before their body was found, and over the months that followed, the bodies of the other 7 hikers who had accompanied the men on their journey were also found. Here's the thing. The bodies were found with signs of blunt force trauma, 3rd-degree burns, and missing appendages. Not only that, but when authorities tested the deceased hikers' clothes, they found them to be radioactive. So, how did a leisurely hike turn into 9 dead men with some of the world's strangest autopsies? No one actually knows, or if they do, they aren't telling. When authorities canvassed the area, they found the men's tent, which was ripped open from the inside, shoe prints, sock prints, and bare footprints. And hypothermia was ruled out by a coroner, despite the fact that the first 2 men to be found had died wearing nothing but their underwear. The explanation given by authorities was that the men had most likely suffered from a phenomenon known as infrasound, in which wind creates a hum that vibrates at a frequency that drives people mad. But that still doesn't explain the radioactive clothes. My guess, they saw something they shouldn't have.
The vanishing of Cynthia Anderson. Cynthia Anderson was working as a legal secretary in Toledo, Ohio in 1981. A year before she disappeared, someone had spray painted "I love you, Cindy," signed GW, across from her office window. Cynthia had no idea who this GW was. Things got even more unsettling when it was painted over, but then reappeared in larger letters. Cynthia was planning to leave her job soon to join her boyfriend at a Bible college, and she was ready to leave because she'd also started receiving anonymous, disturbing phone calls at work. Her work even installed an emergency buzzer at her desk, and she kept her office doors locked at all times. On August 4th, Cynthia got to work normally. She was last seen at about 9:45 a.m. But by lunchtime, when her boss arrived, she was gone. The office was still locked from the inside too. Her car was in the parking lot, but her keys and purse were gone. There were no signs of a struggle. Most chilling was the romance novel she'd been reading was left open on her desk to a scene of the protagonist being abducted at knife point. Her case has never been solved.
At our halfway point today, we have the mystery of the original Dybbuk Box. If you don't know what a Dybbuk Box is, it's a box containing a Dybbuk, which is, in Jewish folklore, an evil spirit that enters and possesses the bodies of the living. And it's also the inspiration behind the movie Possession. The Dybbuk Box first gained popularity after it was posted by its owner on eBay, who claimed to have purchased it from a Jewish World War II survivor who had gotten it while living in Spain. When the owner went to pick it up, the woman's granddaughter told him that growing up the box was always shut and set in high, out-of-reach places, never ever to be opened. The box sold on eBay for $280 to Haxton, who opened it, and inside found a goblet, 2 locks of hair tied with string, pennies, dried rosebud, a cast iron candlestick holder, and a granite statue engraved with Hebrew letters. Soon after opening the box, Haxton experienced a wave of bad luck, which included serious illness. So we spoke to a rabbi who advised him to place the box inside of a gold-lined wooden container. Haxton did as he was told, and then he placed that container into a military-grade safe and buried the safe in the ground. It's safe to say this guy was freaked out. It's impossible to know the truth about what happened to Haxton. I mean, maybe the box was covered in mold, but at the same time, maybe it really does contain a demon. Either way, despite multiple high offers, Haxton refuses to sell the thing. He is keeping it buried underground, and he states that the curse is real, and therefore giving the box to someone even for millions of dollars would be highly unethical.
One of the most compelling cases for the existence of spontaneous human combustion is the sudden death of Mary Reeser. On July 3, 1951, in St. Petersburg, Florida, the landlord of a small apartment building made a pretty horrific discovery. She'd come to Mary Reeser's apartment to deliver a telegram. She found that the apartment doorknob was too hot to touch, and there was soot in the hallway. So she had to get nearby house painters to help her get in, and when they did, they found Mary, or at least what remained of Mary, which wasn't much. In fact, the only thing left of her was a black ashy stain on her armchair, and her foot, almost completely unburned, still sitting inside one of her black slippers. She'd been basically cremated alive, but other tenants hadn't reported a fire. The landlord had only smelt a faint scent of smoke in the wee hours of the morning, and even stranger, the rest of Mary's apartment was pretty unaffected. There were no burn marks on the walls, there were newspapers nearby which were totally intact. Even the chair, aside from the torched remains of the old woman, was totally fine. You could have just vacuumed her up and sold the thing at a garage sale the very next day. So what the hell happened to Mary? Is this a real case of spontaneous human combustion? Some think so. Others think she may have fallen asleep with a lit cigarette, which caught her clothing on fire, and Mary just never woke up.
Next up, we have the mysterious disappearance of flight MH370, a Malaysian Airlines international passenger flight to China that completely vanished on March 8th in 2014. When the plane took off, everything seemed normal until it disappeared from radar after deviating west from its planned flight path, causing it to cross over the Malay Peninsula and the Andaman Sea, never to be seen again. All 227 passengers and 12 crew members were lost, prompting the most expensive missing person search in the history of aviation. Search teams scoured the South China and Andaman Sea, and later, after new information regarding possible flight paths were revealed, the southern Indian Ocean as well. The last communication with the aircraft had been just 38 minutes after the plane left the ground, and at the time everything seemed fine. And so everyone working on this case was baffled as to how Flight 370 could have just disappeared the way it did. In 2015, debris confirmed to have originated from the missing aircraft washed up along the shore of the western Indian Ocean, but the plane itself, nor those on board, were ever recovered. No one knows why, how, or really even if the plane went down that day in March, and as far as I can tell, no one ever will.
It's not often you hear about dogs intentionally trying to take their own lives, but there's one bridge in Scotland where it certainly seems to happen a lot. So much so that it's often referred to as the Bridge of Death, or a more descriptive nickname that I can't say here on YouTube. It's officially named the Overtoun Bridge though, in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland. For decades, people have reported their dogs mysteriously leaping off the 50-foot bridge to the rocks below. Most of them die, some of them severely injured, but as for why they do it, still a mystery, and it's not like people haven't tried to figure it out. There have been investigations, including one by the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, but they couldn't find anything conclusive. There are theories. Some have proposed that maybe there's a certain animal that marks its territory in the area that dogs just feel the need to follow. Some have also proposed some kind of paranormal activity in the area that lures the dogs to their deaths. Here's an idea though: don't walk your dog across this bridge.
Next up, we have the very strange death of a very strange man that took place on January 22nd in 1935. That year, a man going by the name of Ronald T. Owen checked into a hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. The next morning, he let the maid, Mary, into the room, which was lit by a single lamp. The drapes were closed and he watched as she cleaned. Before she left, he told her not to lock the door, saying that he was expecting someone. When Mary returned later that day with clean towels, she found Owen laying in the bed in the dark, fully clothed, with a note next to him that read, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The next morning, when she went to clean the room, the door was locked from the outside, so she figured Owen had gone out, but he hadn't. When the hotel staff opened the door, they found him sitting alone in the dark on his bed. Later that night, two men were heard arguing inside the hotel room, and after that, the hotel switchboard operator noticed that Owen's phone was off the hook. A staff member went up to check on him. Owen said, "Come in," but the door was locked again from the outside. Using a passkey, the staff member entered and found Owen alone in the dark, lying naked in his bed. Later that night, the phone went off the receiver again, but this time when staff entered the room, they found Owen on his hands and knees, bound by the phone's cord, with a fractured skull, multiple impalement wounds, and completely covered in BLOOD. Not only that, but the red liquid was everywhere, covering the walls, the floor, the bathtub, and it was even splattered on the ceiling. When Owen was asked, "Who did this to you?" he simply said, "No one." He was taken to the hospital where he later died of his injuries. Years later, Owen's true identity was revealed as Armidas Ogletree, but the reason of his death, or who killed him, remains an incredibly perplexing mystery.
Finally, we have the whereabouts of treasure marked on an ancient copper map. So in 1947, a Bedouin goat herder stumbled on the Dead Sea Scrolls in a cave near Jerusalem. Among these ancient texts, one intriguing piece is the Copper Scroll. A copper scroll is a metal sheet inscribed with what looks like a treasure map. Points to hidden gold and silver, but the problem is it's written in a mix of Mishnaionic Hebrew and Greek, and it's filled with words that even experts can't figure out. The scroll lists 63 locations where a whopping total of over 160 tons of treasure might be buried, but the clues are maddeningly vague. There are translations reading about how some is hidden in the quote gutter in the bottom of the tank, or 65 gold bars in the quote cavity of the old house of tribute on the chain platform. Like, what the hell is that in reference to? There are a few guesses about what this treasure could be. Some think it might belong to the residents of Qumran, where the scrolls were found. That would be kind of odd though, because they were thought to be a religious group that didn't really care much for wealth. Another theory suggests the treasure could be valuable items from the destroyed Second Temple of Jerusalem. Some even think though that the scroll could have been an ancient hoax, and that there is and never was any treasure at all. And I hope that's the case, because that is pretty funny. Well, there you have it. You learn anything today?
I learned that there's a lot of crazy things that happen.
The more you know, the less you know, they say. We'll catch you in the next video, folks.
That we will.
James.
Hannah.